Number 10. Christopher Titus. The American comedian did not hold back when it came to criticizing Will Smith for the initial incident at the 2022 Oscars when he walked on stage and slapped Chris Rock for joking about his wife Jada. Titus took to the podcast Christopher Titus TV and openly spoke about his disdain for the actor. Quote, "Watching the arrogance of Will Smith that night, I think that Will Smith probably believes he can do anything. In fact, many comedians took particular issue with Chris Rock being attacked, arguing that they should not be afraid for their own safety on stage, just because they like to tell risky jokes." But Titus did not find Will's latest YouTube apology to be sincere either, and was among the many Twitter voices that condemned the video as fake and self-centered. Quote, "Will Smith has lost me again. Dude, Chris said he'll contact you when he's ready. Why are you pushing him? You attacked a man on a global broadcast. You don't get to pick the redemption schedule, and by doing it publicly, you made it about you again." So it seems like Titus doesn't think Will deserves a get out of jail free card just yet. Number 9. Morgan Tremaine. Known for his explosive testimony during the Johnny Depp vs. Amber Heard defamation trial, former TMZ journalist Morgan Tremaine garnered international praise for his infamous, quick-witted comeback to Heard's lawyer Elaine Bredhoft. But Tremaine once again was able to articulate what many people were thinking about the latest apology video from Will Smith. According to the producer, the video appeared more like a PR stunt than a genuine apology. Quote, "This Will Smith apology video has PR team written all over it. They're testing the waters to see how the general public feels about him. Nothing to do with Chris." There might be some truth to how Tremaine feels though, because apart from the obvious product placement, the apology also serves another purpose, as Will is now starting to make big moves in an effort to have a career comeback, which has suffered quite a bit due to him being cancelled. It's been revealed that Smith is planning to star in a sequel to one of his most iconic movies, I Am Legend. So it makes sense that what we are now seeing is the actor slowly trying to rebuild his reputation in Hollywood. Number 8. Chris Rock's brothers. Chris's brother Kenny Rock told the LA Times that he would like to see the Academy take back the Oscar that Will won that night. However, what gets to him most about the entire incident is that he has continued to watch it play out on TV over and over again, and there's nothing that he can do. Quote, "It eats at me watching it over and over again because you've seen a loved one being attacked and there's nothing you can do about it. My brother was no threat to him and you just had no respect for him in that moment. You just belittled him in front of millions of people that watched the show." Tony Rock, who was actually close with Will at one point, called out the actor during a comedy show. Quote, "If you think you're gonna walk up on this stage, this ain't the mother effing Oscars." He threatened to fight back if Will ever tried the same thing with him. In fact, the Oscar winner addressed Tony during his apology video. Quote, "I want to apologize to Chris's family, especially Tony Rock. You know, we had a great relationship. You know, Tony Rock was my man, and this is probably irreparable." That seems to be the case, as one Twitter user asked if the actor approved of Will's apology, and he simply responded by saying no. Number 7. The View. Smith received a hell of a lot of criticism for the slap itself, but a lot of people really seem to take issue with the video apology that he released a whole 4 months after the incident. The ladies on The View spoke about how disappointing it was to see Will Smith upload a 5-minute video addressing what is actually a really serious issue, considering it happened to Dave Chappelle too that same month. The hosts voiced their opinion about the Oscar slap and spoke about Will's apology video not long after it was released. While they unanimously agreed that it was a good first step, they said it simply wasn't enough to make good with Chris Rock. Alyssa Farrow Griffin said, "I think he's got to go further, and even the fact that he didn't do this in more of an interview format where he might be challenged with some tough questions, I was a little surprised by." She then went on to say that it's a lot easier to say something scripted to camera than to ask, "What was your motivation? Why didn't you then apologize in your acceptance speech?" Alyssa feels Smith should have sat down with Oprah because then she would have challenged him. Joy Behar also agreed with her and thought he should have come on The View instead. But it's clear that they felt the video format of the apology made it much too easy for him to evade criticism. Number 6. Megyn Kelly. The veteran journalist believed that Smith made it all about himself at the Oscars when he walked on stage and slapped his longtime friend. Megyn Kelly was super critical of his actions that night and felt that the actor simply saw an opportunity to make himself appear as the tough guy standing up for his partner. She said that most guys would have handled it after the set and spoken to the comedian backstage. Then Kelly insisted that Smith used his 2 minutes on the world stage to defend his actions when he should have been apologizing immediately for how he acted. Quote, "It was a defense of him losing his temper. He should have got up there and he should have said, 'I'm very sorry for my bad behavior. I apologize to Chris, to the other nominees, and to the people whose attention I've wrongly dragged away from them on what would be their greatest night of their lives.'" Well, does she feel any differently now? Not really. In fact, she recently called out his newest post YouTube video on the Megyn Kelly show and reiterated her comments, this time suggesting that Smith is only sorry now because he has a new movie coming out, so he really needs that public forgiveness to ensure its success. Number 5. Bill Maher. The comedian and television host made it pretty clear that he despises Will Smith on several occasions, most notably on one episode of his talk show Real Time with Bill Maher, which aired on April 1st. Bill reacted to the explosive outrage against the actor at the time. Quote, "To Will Smith, stay strong and I got your back," before following it up with, "April Fools, you're a D." Maher went on to say that he couldn't feel sorry for Pinkett Smith because according to him, comparing a woman to Demi Moore looking her hottest is not exactly the worst insult he's ever heard. Then he made a pretty controversial comparison. Quote, "I mean, alopecia is not leukemia." And no, he has not changed his opinion since. In fact, in another episode, Bill did a revived edition of Explaining Jokes to Idiots where he made fun of cancel culture, the increased attacks against comedians, and called Will Smith humor impaired. He then said that it comes down to doing crowd work while hosting the Oscars. Celebrities should try to be a good sport and allow themselves to be made fun of for 1 minute. The politically incorrect alum even noted that Chris Rock's joke was initially received as funny by the audience, including Will Smith, who was initially spotted laughing before he decided to do anything else. Number 4. Wanda Sykes. She co-hosted this year's Oscars along with Amy Schumer and Regina Hall. So comedian Wanda Sykes really saw everything unfold firsthand on Hollywood's Night of Nights, and she had a lot to say about it. Right after the Oscars, she addressed Will Smith's actions. Quote, "For them to let him stay in that room and enjoy the rest of the show and accept his award, I was like, how gross is this? This is just the wrong message," before joking that she wanted to be able to run out after he won and say, "Unfortunately, Will couldn't be here tonight." And while performing a stand-up comedy show in Orlando, she brought it up again, saying, "I'm still traumatized. I couldn't believe he was still sitting there. Shouldn't you be sitting there with a lawyer or LAPD?" She added that he hopes he gets his life together, but until then, F him. Wanda clearly hasn't changed her opinion of Smith. In fact, while appearing as a guest on a recent episode of Live with Kelly and Ryan, they asked her if she'd be open to hosting the Oscars again, and she just said, "Oh, hell no." To be fair, she did happen to co-host the most dramatic Academy Awards ceremony in recent history, as she recalled the incident again. Quote, "So everybody's just gonna sit here? I was like, the show just kept going on, and I looked behind the curtain and he's still sitting here. What is happening? What is going on?" It was crazy. It was just bizarre. Number 3. Sharon Osbourne. In an April interview with the Sunday Times, the former talk co-host expressed her opinion on the Oscar incident. Osbourne made the comparison when explaining the hypocrisy she sees where some people are too scared to make judgments to a person's face about their behavior, but will do so behind a computer screen or behind their back, and used the recent Oscars incident between Will Smith and Chris Rock as an example. Quote, "When he wins Best Actor award, everybody stands up. It's like, you're such hypocrites. You're going to go home and say how disgraceful his behavior was, but you stand up and give him a standing ovation." But most controversially, she then went on to compare Will Smith to Hitler, insinuating that no matter how horrible someone is, the industry will still try and find a way to make money off of them. Although her experience isn't exactly like Will Smith's, Sharon Osbourne dealt with plenty of criticism of her own, following her comments on the talk over the Piers Morgan and Meghan Markle feud. After a heated discussion with her and the talk show co-host last year, she was fired from the show by CBS, so she's no stranger to backlash herself, but clearly she didn't mind comparing Will Smith to possibly the worst person who ever existed. Number 2. Rosie O'Donnell. The comedian actually compared Will Smith to former President Trump, blasting the Oscar winner as a narcissistic madman who isn't being held accountable for slapping Chris Rock during the Oscars. O'Donnell took to Twitter to condemn Smith for the stunning confrontation at the 94th Annual Academy Awards. She wrote to her more than 1 million Twitter followers, quote, "We watched him do it. Then, like the Trump years, we don't hold anyone accountable. Shame on us, shame on Will." O'Donnell made it very clear that she believes that the Oscars had failed everyone by not publicly denouncing Will right after the incident occurred and still allowing him to accept his award. But comedians do tend to stand together on this issue, and she went on to praise Chris Rock for his composure after he was attacked on stage. Quote, "So upsetting on every level. bravo to Chris Rock for not eviscerating Will Smith, which he could do any day of the week. He walked away from a sad display of toxic masculinity. Those words sound pretty harsh, but it's very clear that she absolutely hates Smith for his erratic behavior that night, and the message it sends to other comedians. And coming in at number 1, Chris Rock himself. The comedian has not publicly commented directly on the slap, including in the wake of Smith's recent video apology, which was directly addressed to him. Instead, Chris Rock chose to use comedy to speak about the incident. During his apology video, the actor insisted that he's reached out to Chris, and the message that came back is that he's not ready to talk, which couldn't be more apparent. He first brought it up during a stand-up set at London's Royal Albert Hall. Quote, "I'm okay. If anybody's wondering, got most of my hearing back." He followed that up with, "Don't expect me to talk about the BS. Your tickets were expensive, but not that expensive." Rock also referenced the incident when Dave Chappelle was attacked on stage near the end of his performance during the Netflix Is a Joke festival. When talking about the assailant, the comedian said, "I thought that was Will Smith." After the recent apology was posted, Rock continued to make jokes while on stage in Atlanta. Quote, "If everybody claims to be a victim, then nobody will hear the real victims. Even me getting smacked by Suge Smith, I went to work the next day. I got kids." He also added that anyone who says words hurt has never been punched in the face. Gotta love his take on that.
Coming in at number 10 on our list is Mia Farrow. Mia Farrow is an actress who was extremely outspoken about her reaction to the ill-fated Oscars night. After it happened, she took to Twitter to post, quote, "It was just a joke. Jokes are what Chris Rock does. Always has been edgy. This was a mild joke for him, and I love G.I. Jane. What I saw was one of Hollywood's most powerful movie stars stalking onto a stage to strike a comedian for an unfortunate joke about his gorgeous wife's shaved head. Anyone who is okay with that has probably never been hit by a powerful man. As we advise our kids, use your words." A lot of people in the comments to her post were duking it out, with some people equating alopecia to cancer, and others saying that Will Smith should be jailed for slapping Chris. My favorite reply was someone linking another tweet saying, quote, "It's actually not funny at all. Will Smith could have killed him with that slap. What if his hand had been full of bees and Chris Rock was allergic to bees and one of the bees stung Chris and nobody had an EpiPen? Not funny now, is it?" Next up is Howard Stern, who had a whole show planned before he decided to scrap it all and focus on the Oscars incident instead. Quote, "Well, I had a whole show planned, but I gotta throw that out because I want to vent about this Oscars thing that occurred." The blunt reporter certainly held nothing back and did in fact vent quite readily about the whole situation. Quote, "This is a sign of great mental illness when you can't control your impulse. Not only that, it was hardly an insulting joke. It wasn't even a good joke." It may be safe to say that Howard Stern wasn't too fond of Will Smith after the headline made the incident. He even compared Will to former US President Donald Trump. He also criticized the Academy's handling of the situation, including the lack of security taking action. While there have been mixed reports on whether or not Will Smith was asked to leave the ceremony following the slap, the star still went onto stage to collect his award for Best Actor mere moments later. Howard Stern was upset that no one seemed to care and even cheered for him once he won the award. Quote, "Will Smith harmed another human being, and you guys did nothing." Another celebrity who will definitely never work with Will Smith is Judd Apatow. Probably the most embarrassing set of tweets to come out of the whole Oscars slap situation were Judd Apatow's, which are since deleted. Although he was one of the first people to call out Will Smith for his behavior, some think that he took it way too far. Judd wrote on Twitter, quote, "He could have killed him. That's pure out-of-control rage and aggression." After he received pushback for the tweet, the 40-year-old Virgin director elaborated his viewpoints on the SiriusXM pop culture spotlight. He admitted that he wasn't actually watching the Oscars when he took to Twitter, but was instead informed of the incident while on the phone with a friend. That being said, he did stick by his statements about Will Smith in other interviews. Quote, "As soon as that line is crossed, really anything can happen. That's what happened, but something else could have happened too." Judd also told Pop Culture Spotlight, quote, "I just think there certainly is a way of handling dissatisfaction. We should never tell people that the solution is to break that barrier and leap on the stage and commit an act of harm in front of people who are inspired by you." Coming in at number 7, Rosie O'Donnell. Not unlike Howard Stern's take, Rosie O'Donnell also had a problem with how the Academy Award organizers handled the situation. Clearly, Rosie was signing off to Team Chris Rock when she tweeted out, quote, "So upsetting on every level. Bravo to Chris Rock for not eviscerating Will Smith, which he could do any day of the week. He walked away. Bravo from a sad display of toxic masculinity from a narcissistic madman. If only they would take it into the ring, then we could truly see who is eviscerating who. In addition to making it clear that she believed Chris Rock could demolish Smith in, I guess, a battle of comedic minds, Rosie also heavily criticized the Academy for their initial response to the entire situation. In a separate tweet written in response to a statement released by the organization about not condoning violence, she asked, quote, "Then why did you do nothing?" O'Donnell didn't stop there. She also spent quite a bit of time retweeting messages from her friends and other Twitter users that all condemn Will Smith's actions and praise Chris Rock for not acting in retaliation. Kathy Griffin is up next as someone who likely won't work with Will Smith based on how she reacted to the Oscars, having very clearly sided with Chris Rock in this situation. She tweeted out, quote, "Let me tell you something. It's a very bad practice to walk up on stage and physically harm a comedian. Now we all have to worry about who wants to be the next Will Smith in comedy clubs and theaters." It's perhaps extremely unsurprising that Griffin, who herself loves to push the boundaries of comedy, would side with Chris Rock in this situation and be more concerned about the safety of comedians after seeing Chris Rock get slapped over a joke. Given her own controversies of inciting violence against former President Donald Trump that landed her in trouble with the Secret Service, we weren't surprised to see that she got some pushback from her tweets about being kind to one another. Next up is comedian Jim Carrey. It's unlikely any comedian in general will side with Will Smith, considering the precedents it sets. But while touring for Sonic the Hedgehog 2, Jim Carrey was asked about his reaction to Will Smith getting on stage and hitting Chris. The comedian had this to say, quote, "I was sickened. I was sickened by the standing ovation. I felt like Hollywood is just spineless en masse. And it really felt like this is a real clear indication that we're not the cool club anymore. I'd have announced this morning that I was suing Will for $200 million because that video is going to be there forever. It's going to be ubiquitous. That insult is going to last a very long time. If you want to yell from the audience or disapprove or show disapproval or say something on Twitter or whatever, you do not have the right to walk up on stage and smack somebody in the face because they said words." Next up is Luke Skywalker himself, Mark Hamill. He has always been extremely outspoken on Twitter, and the Oscar slap incident was no exception. The night of the incident, he tweeted, quote, "Stand-up comics are very adept at handling hecklers. Physical harm, not so much." Okay, I abbreviated this because I'm not allowed to say a lot of words due to our feudal lords at YouTube, but you get the idea. The tweet left a heated debate in the comments, with one user writing, quote, "Chris Rock was wrong. Mocking Jada's medical condition, especially on stage in front of hundreds of people, is despicable. I don't blame Will for getting upset or for doing what he did." While another user wrote, quote, "You can't just harm people. Even if someone says something part of being an adult is understanding that you can't just hit people. I like Will Smith and I have compassion for his wife, but he was wrong to hit Chris Rock." Coming in at number 3 is Janet Hubert. Janet Hubert has had beef with Will Smith that predates the Oscars, thank God, all the way back to the 90s when she worked alongside him in The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. She played Aunt Viv for 3 seasons before their beef led to her being replaced in 1993. She told HuffPost decades later, quote, "My departure was planned for a long time. There will never be a reunion for The Fresh Prince. Will Smith and Alfonso destroyed a 20-year career with untruths. I got slammed." Will apologized later in an Essence magazine article, but it still lingers. It's still there. Apparently, the beef started when Smith refused to vouch for Hubert when she wanted a pay raise and a contract renegotiation. Meanwhile, tons of rumors circulated that she was notoriously extremely difficult to work with, which derailed her career and she never really recovered from it. That being said, they did have a tentative truce when Will invited her onto the Fresh Prince reunion that she earlier said would never happen. Although I doubt she'd go through filming anything with him again. Next up is Chris Rock's brother, Tony Rock. Absolutely no surprise that he comes to his sibling's defense. Airing his frustrations on a stand-up set a few days after the Oscar slap incident, Tony stated, quote, "If you think you're gonna walk up on this stage, this ain't the Oscars. And if you walk your ass up here, you ain't nominated for but these hands." As the crowd cheered, Tony took it a step further, adding, quote, "I didn't want to start the show like that. You're gonna hit my brother." Tony also made it clear on Twitter after Will Smith apologized to Chris that he does not accept the apology on his brother's behalf by stating, quote, "No," when asked if he forgave him. Last but certainly not least is Chris Rock, who was the recipient of the slap in question. Interestingly, he said absolutely nothing about the slap and has kept extremely quiet. He's currently on tour and has made zero mention of the incident, although I'm sure he could have gotten away with a few digs considering that most people took his side. But that being said, I doubt he'd be running to star alongside Will Smith in any comedy anytime soon.